Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, where we talk about the biggest and the best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I am John Negroni, film editor for theyoungfolks.com, and I'm also a film critic. I write for sites like Awards Watch and The Spool. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he is a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend. He's the co-creator of Cinemaholics. You know him, you love him, you know to love him. It's Will Ashton.
Hey there.
You can find more episodes of our show, including our full archive, on cinemaholics.com. We also have written reviews and other bonus content there. We have a merch page. It's a whole fun thing, and you can go check it out. We want you to email us, though. We want to hear from you, see how you're doing, check in. You know, if you haven't emailed us in a while, just want to make sure you're all right. Cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. As usual, links to all this stuff is in the show notes. Our Patreon, if you want to support us on a monthly basis. If you want to, go to our, I already said, but our merch page. If you want to do that, all that stuff's in the show notes. Check it out. It's a fun time.
Well, the more you mention the merch page, the more people know that we have merch.
Yeah, hey, there's not enough press is not a problem. But yeah, Will, so we're only talking about one movie this week? What's going on?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of my fault. I've only had the chance to see one film this weekend, and that was Dear Evan Hansen, the Universal musical based on the Tony-winning Broadway hit of the same name. With
I guess one movie was enough. It was so good. You were like, well, I don't need to see anything else.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not the case. Funny enough, because what's it?
I guess we're going to find out more in the review.
Sure. Well, I was just going to say the main reason I couldn't see more is because I'm back to work. I'm out at the theater, and we were playing this film for the grand reopening, which was very exciting. And
it was packed. There were crowds. You had your job full of it this weekend. No wonder you didn't have time.
Well, I will say I was very busy, but we played it, and I had the chance to sneak in and see a showing of it. So that's how I'm able to talk about it on this here episode.
Yeah, I'm curious, because Pittsburgh's pretty nice to the director, right? Because the director is Perks of Being a Wallflower fave.
Yeah,
that's the case.
Yeah,
Steven Spatsky.
My director for Perks Being Wallflower, my big
he directed you.
Film.
He had the privilege of telling you what to do and where to go and who to be.
Told me walk down this hallway and to stand in this spot for this cafeteria scene and all that.
That's right. I feel like, I'm sure the listeners haven't listened to every single episode of the show yet, but I hope many have already heard the story of the Lashins involvement in Perks of Being a Wallflower. Well, it'll never get old. I always love it.
I mean, it's good to mention only in the sense that I don't know if there is some slight or small bias that I have worked very indirectly with the filmmaker before.
Probably, but embrace it. Own it.
I mean, I had no creative involvement with the film. I was there on set, and I was a part of the film. You
did write the script,
sure,
and you are a producer.
Yeah, I wrote the book. No, I had no creative involvement with the film. Whether you love it or hate it, I had no involvement with that. I just am in a couple scenes as a background artist, as they say, back when I was fresh out of high school, and it's hard to believe that was 10 years ago. Well,
I loved the movie Will Ashton, and when I found out you were involved in it, I loved it a little less, but at the same time, I'm just kidding. That's
okay.
Fair. No. I loved it even more. That's what the listeners expected to hear, right? And it's true. So we're talking about Dear Evan Hansen in this show, but we have some off topics to get to because I saw a couple things. I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to if there were other movies you wanted to hear about this weekend, there's at least one that I'm going to talk about in off topics that I actually really highly recommend. But first in off topics, Will Ashton, you have something to plug for the listeners.
Oh, yeah, you bet. So I haven't had a chance to promote the last couple episodes of Any Ogre to Its Ogre, our sister podcast, the one I do with Matt Serafini and Chris Sheridan.
You're trying to keep it underground, you don't want too many people listening, it seems.
Sure. So I don't think I actually talked about our August episode, which was our big switcheroo, which we did with friends of the podcast, Charlie Ridgely and Corey Woodruff of Generation VHS. They took over our show. I think we did
talk about it.
Did we?
I think I talked about how it threw me off and ruined my whole week because I was so confused.
I mean, we talked about it privately. I don't know if you actually talked about it on the air.
I had to double check. Okay.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't remember. But if I didn't
I'm still recovering from that, by the way.
But yeah, I mean, it was a fun little thing. They talked about The Master of Disguise, and we went on their podcast, and we talked about Kangaroo Jack, which is a film that we name drop a lot throughout this season. So it was fun to actually revisit the film. Or at least it was fun to talk about it. The film itself has, as you can imagine, not aged terribly well, and we have a lot to say about it. So yeah, check out that episode and check out the one that Corey and Charlie did for our show. And then also in September, we had our big conspiracy theory episode where we had a surprise caller who goes by the name of Dale Johnson come on and tell us a bunch of wild conspiracies about the film that we watched, which is, of course, The Master of Disguise. So I think they're both very fun episodes. And I guess all three of them, yeah, because I was also a big fan of what we did on Generation VHS. So I would hope you check out all three of those episodes.
There's so much content. I mean, there's so much to enjoy and appreciate. So, listeners, don't keep listening. Just turn us off right now. Go straight to that. But yeah, if you're still here for some reason, I guess I'll talk about real quick a couple stuff I saw. I'm going to talk about 2 movies and a TV show. We're going to end on a high note, right? We're going to start with a really good movie. Then we're going to go into a movie that I don't recommend. And then we'll finish with something I recommend more than anything else I've seen lately. First is I Am Your Man, or I'm Your Man, actually it's called. So this movie, we kind of briefly talked about it last week, and I think, Will, you were the one who mentioned, I was like, oh, did that play at TIFF? And I wasn't sure. I wanted to say yes, but I didn't want to, be incorrect and all that stuff. But yeah, so I'm Your Man premiered at TIFF, and this is a Danish film. It's a Danish film that stars the one and only Dan Stevens. Dan Stevens, who we love, right? We love Dan Stevens. We support him. We follow him around, right?
I don't know about that, but I think he's a very fine actor. I've enjoyed his work of late.
Yeah, I was trying to trap you.
Sure.
Obviously. Yeah, I think the last thing I saw him in was Eurovision, the Fire Saga.
Yeah, I think that's the last thing I saw him in as well. Which
fantastic comedy.
Yeah, not a film I'm particularly fond of, but I thought he was very good in that scene-stealing supporting role.
Oh, and he was also in The Rental. I don't know if that came out before or after, but I remember him in The Rental.
I think it
kind
was
of a different movie for him.
Yeah, I think a little bit after, but around the same time.
Sure. Yeah, both 2020 movies. I haven't seen anything else he's done since, but wow, yeah, Dan Stevens, love him. He's going to be in Eternals, I think. And I don't know what part he plays.
Is he?
I haven't seen the trailer. Yeah, he plays a character in Eternals. I don't think it's a huge role, but I'm not sure. But all that to say, love Dan Stevens.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen him in the trailer, but I mean, maybe I missed it.
Maybe. Maybe he's on the trailer. Maybe I just spoiled everybody on that. But I remember reading it in the trades. But yeah, Maria Schrader directed this new movie, I'm Your Man. And I think she's best known for Love Life. So not Love Life, the Anna Kendrick show on HBO Max. Don't worry. Calm down. But no, this is Love Life, the movie that came out, I think it was like 2007. So it's been a good minute since that film. It's based on a novel and everything. She was also behind this really popular miniseries that came out on Netflix. I forget if it was 2019 or 2020, but it's called Unorthodox, which I never got into Unorthodox, but I remember a lot of people liked that show. I remember a lot of people were like, hey, have you checked out Unorthodox? You'll never believe it, but it's Unorthodox.
I mean, that wasn't, I haven't seen it, but I remember that was like a big surprise upset at the Emmys because it was up against like a bunch of like shows that were really well known and acclaimed, and that like snuck the win, and that put it on my radar, but I never got a chance to watch it, but I heard it was very good. Yeah,
I've heard awesome things. Yeah, I think she's like a showrunner on that, if I'm not mistaken, and obviously directed some of it, I believe is also the case. It won an Emmy, and yeah, all that said, this is her big movie follow-up to that project, and I really, really dug I'm Your Man. I don't think it'll be in my top 10 of the year, but if there was like a list of movies that I just, if I had a list of like my favorite movies of the year that just kind of like hit me at the right moment, movies that really made me think, this is one of those movies. I feel like I'm Your Man is going to kind of like grow in my estimation over time. So this movie is kind of like a sci-fi romance. It's like a sci-fi dramedy, actually, like romantic dramedy. It's very funny. The premise, like, I don't want to give away all of it because I watched it super fresh, I didn't know anything about it. And there's something that really fun that happens in the opening scene. But, it's like the very opening scene. But I'm going to go ahead and blab about like what the basic hook of the movie is. And basically it's like the near future. I mentioned this is a Danish film. It takes place, I think, in like Copenhagen, if I'm not mistaken. And we follow this young woman. She is a scientist. Like she does things with, I think, like hieroglyphics and languages and everything like that. And she participates in this trial. It's a 3-week trial to spend time with basically an android, a robot that looks exactly like a human, kind of like a replicant, but like if an android had like all of the like knowledge and like all of the internet at its disposal. So it's like super hyper intelligent. It's physically just like able to do things. It kind of is probably like that Black Mirror episode almost with what's his name? Donald Gleason. I don't know if you ever watched that Black Mirror with him and Haley Atwell, but it's very similar to that. And the whole premise is that she has to spend 3 weeks with him. And is she going to fall in love? She doesn't want to because he's a robot and she's human. How could it ever work? That probably sounds pretty trite, doesn't it?
Maybe. I've actually, to answer your question, never seen any of Black Mirror.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you had seen some of them.
Nope.
I didn't think you'd seen all of them. I thought you had seen maybe some. Didn't you see Bandersnatch?
I have seen 0 Black Mirror episodes.
Who did I talk about Bandersnatch with? I remember watching that and talking about it with a buddy.
Julia Tatey, I believe, was on that episode, and you talked about it with her. Or Emily Kubenkamp. Or yeah.
Good memory. Wow. I think you're right. But anyway, so yeah, I should say I've only seen like a couple of Black Mirror things, and this is one of the very few. So there you go. But I think what I really like about this, like I said, it sounds kind of trite. It sounds kind of like, all right, I know where this is going, but I really dug this because it is a very well written version of a story that you might find somewhat predictable. And I will say it goes in directions I actually wasn't expecting. I mean, the whole setup is that, is it ethical for people to have partners that are like programmed to love them? And this woman is very much against that. She's like, well, why, like human beings and all their conventions and all their flaws, like that's the point. That's how we get to a place where society can thrive. And yeah, it's a really fun thought experiment. It's also just really darkly funny. And yeah, this movie was a breath of fresh air. It's a really tight runtime. It's only, it's less than 2 hours, like 105 minutes. And it's just so beautifully done and very well crafted. I mean, it's not flashy or anything. The sci-fi stuff isn't in your face. They do a lot of practical stuff here that works really well. There are maybe a few scenes here that, like, what prevents this from being one of my faves of the year is that it's a little hapdash and some of the technical stuff. I mean, there's a little bit of wonky CGI here and there that kind of takes you out of the movie. So kind of go in with managed expectations. But yeah, if you're looking for just a really brainy, but also warm kind of sci-fi movie with a fun premise, fun thought of experiment, this is one of those movies where you can watch with some friends and have a really good conversation right after. It's really entertaining. It's an easy watch. It's breezy. It's not the most thought-provoking film, but it's provoking enough that I think you get something out of it. So yeah, I just think it's a really well-rounded kind of movie for what it is. It's not too pretentious. I don't know. There was nothing about this movie that like felt a little bit like, oh, we got to be subversive for the sake of it. It actually felt creative in a lot of good ways. It almost reminded me a little bit of like, in the way it kind of blends so many genres, a little bit of like Parasite in a small way. How that movie is just able to be just so satisfying on so many different levels without really going full tilt on any weird genre stuff that would feel kind of unearned or anything. So yeah, not to compare it to Parasite. It's not like as good of a movie as that one, but yeah, I think it's a gem. I'll say that.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I was most curious about, you might have mentioned this already and I missed it, but isn't Sandra Hüller in this film?
Yeah, I forgot to mention Sandra Hüller. Hüller? Yeah, main character.
Okay.
Or not, sorry, not the main character. She's the Maren Eggert is the main character. Sandra Hüller is kind of like this, like, how do you describe her? She like works for the company that manages the robots.
The like the boss, the main engineer, or like the
No, she's like an employee. Okay. She's kind of like, she's the handler. She's handling things. She's like the liaison. Like she's the Julie. If we have Avatar: The Last Airbender fans in here.
Yeah. I didn't know if this was going to be like a more lighthearted Ex Machina kind of thing, and she was like the Oscar Isaac kind of character. But
no. If anything, I don't know. I think people will probably recognize her from like Tony Erdmann, right?
Yes, that's which I love. Thing. I love Tony Erdmann a lot, right. Which is why I was excited to see that she was in a new movie. I think she's been in other things as well. Just a lot of stuff that flew under the radar. Right.
Yeah. This is probably a bigger, higher profile thing because I didn't see Proxima. I remember she was in that, but other than that, I don't remember anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure she's been in other just things I haven't heard of. But
sure.
Yeah, that said, the main character here, I should give her due attention, is Maren Eggert, and you will fall in love with this character. So well written, so surprising, so well suited for this role. She's an unpredictable character. She really straddles the line between unlikable and heartfelt. Like, she's the audience surrogate, but at the same time, a lot of people will watch this and be like, I wouldn't do what she's doing right now. But as the movie progresses and it evolves her character, you understand and empathize with her so much, kind of in the same way the android is. So yeah, good movie. Just really good movie all around. I really recommend it. So that's I'm Your Man.
Right on.
The other movie I saw this week, you heard about The Starling, Will, but you chose, you didn't have time for it. And, I don't blame you, right? We won a lot of promise for this Netflix movie.
Sure.
I mean, it premiered at Toronto, but yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I think I reached out to you, or maybe I didn't actually reach out to you. I was going to ask you if there's anything else I should watch today, but then I realized
you brought it up.
I wasn't sure if that meant I had to watch what is it called? The Starling or Sterling?
The Starling, which I kind of just watched on a whim yesterday. I had a little bit of time and I was like, all right, well, this is the other movie that came out this week. Why not?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't one I was avoiding. I remember it was supposed to get, I think, a theatrical release at one point, and then it got bought out by Netflix. And I didn't really hear much about it until it was coming out, and it got kind of a muted response. And I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe that's just Netflix, burying another film again, as they usually do. But as the reviews started to trickle out, I heard it was not only pretty bad, but almost disastrously bad. And I was kind of curious, but it sounded like
hyperbole. Okay. It's not disastrously bad.
Sure. Well, I figured I had seen one movie this week that was kind of notoriously misguided. I didn't know if I needed to see two, so I opted not to see this film.
Look, you're not missing much, right? This is a weak film, right? It's the kind of movie that I think a lot of people will watch and not even realize that there are things about it that are a bit yikes. But yeah, it's just, I think the issue is that it was kind of like elevated to sort of the TIFF profile. So you have no choice then to compare it to a lot of much better films. So the movie I was thinking about a lot during this, early on, was like, all right, well, we know the star is Melissa McCarthy. She shows up very early on.
Reuniting
Chris
with
O'Dowd.
Chris
O'Dowd.
Yeah. Well, weren't they both in
Bridesmaids?
Yeah, but also weren't they in St. Vincent, which the director of this also made?
Director of this made St. Vincent, which I actually have never seen St. Vincent.
It's all right.
That came out.
It's nice.
He also directed Hidden Figures. That was obviously, Hidden Figures was the big one.
Yeah.
Right. Really put him on the map back in, 2016. But yeah, I mean, that was like an Oscar contender. I don't remember if St. Vincent got any awards attention, but I guess if you look at the cast of The Starling, you'd be like, oh my gosh, like this movie's gonna break big. People are gonna lose their minds over this movie. We've got Melissa McCarthy, right? Yeah. Can You Ever Forgive Me is the movie that I was like, oh yeah. I was like, oh yeah, she could still make movies that if you put like a festival release behind it and you have somebody who knows what they're doing as a director, you're good. Like Melissa McCarthy can deliver the goods.
Yes.
You have Chris O'Dowd. He's obviously an indie darling.
Sure.
Also has mainstream appeal.
Can't do an American accent to save his life, but he...
And that's fine. They don't let him. They're just like, just do the other accent. You don't need to... You're not fooling anybody anyway.
Yeah. And I looked it up. Chris O'Dowd was in St. Vincent as well. I was correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Fact checked. Okay. And then, hey, look, we also had Timothy Olyphant. What? Daveed Diggs? Laura Harrier from Spider-Man Homecoming. I mean, Kevin Kline, also known in the industry as Kevin Decline. You know why he's called Kevin Decline? Because he declines all the roles. He won't show up in a movie. I don't think I've seen him in a movie since Dean. Was it like 4 years ago?
Oh, man, I forgot about Dean. Yeah, that was a big showcase for him. Yeah, that was a prominent role for him and not so prominent film.
Right. And hey, look, he has a really prominent supporting turn in this. I'd say he's one of the actual main characters. And where the Starling kind of, first of all, the Starling, this should have been at Sundance. This is not a TIFF movie. This is Sundance all the way through. This is like a 2008 kind of like Sundance offbeat comedy drama, like a dramedy. It does not, like, this is not TIFF. Like, I was very surprised that it actually did get the TIFF treatment. And it's, of course, streaming right now on Netflix. So you can watch it right now, too. But it's just one of those, like, big ensemble things where, like, it's a recognizable cast for the sake of it. Timothy Olyphant has 3 lines. Maybe Daveed Diggs has, like, 2. Like, we're really not looking at a cast that makes the most of its cast. And I think that's a big shame. I mean, I kind of was a little annoyed at how this movie kind of like squanders its cast. Like, you got some big names in here. I'd say that Kevin Kline, Melissa McCarthy, and Chris O'Dowd, they're the 3 heavies in this, right? They're the ones with the most lines, with the most drama and everything. But this movie is like a parody of itself. I mean, I'm sure some people will watch it, and the setup is that Melissa McCarthy and Chris O'Dowd are a married couple. They just went through a terrible tragedy where their daughter, who's a baby, has passed away. Chris O'Dowd is in a mental institution trying to recover because he's just not able to deal with it. And Melissa McCarthy is trying to support him. They're still married, but their marriage is a big question mark at the moment, and she's trying to survive, just day-to-day life. And it's a great setup. And, obviously, as I mentioned, good cast. Kevin Kline plays a veterinarian who used to be a therapist, and he strikes up a friendship with Melissa McCarthy's character. And, as you can imagine, the plot kind of goes from there of how they sort of are able to their friendship turns into therapy or whatever. And yeah, it's the basis for a pretty moving drama. It tries to be a comedy, though, at so many turns and fails. It puts jokes into these like serious moments. It's become infamous for inserting a Borat joke in the middle of a melodramatic, serious monologue for seemingly no reason. I mean, it has this thread where, like, they do set up that McCarthy and Chris O'Dowd's character, they kind of they use jokes and humor to sort of diffuse situations, but it feels like one of those things the director included because he knows he's dealing with people who are funny. He's like, well, we can't have a Melissa McCarthy movie unless she's making jokes at least once per scene, and it doesn't fit. It really doesn't fit. This was written by Matt Harris, and I feel like it has its heart in the right place for the most part. I think some of its psychobabble is really bad. Like, I think some of the messaging in this movie is really bad. They try to liken recovering from depression and things like that. And I don't know, some of the advice in this movie I thought was very misguided. I can see why critics are thrashing it because it feels dated and old fashioned. It's kind of relying on some of these like idioms and wisdom from the past that are really out of touch. This idea that like, okay, real therapy doesn't work, but just real talk. That's what's going to get you through it. You know what I mean? And it's that kind of thing. We're like, well, come on, it's 2021. I think we sort of moved past that sort of like, we're ashamed of the fact that therapy is a thing and, it's something that people don't want to do. So we're going to pretend that it doesn't work so that people will get some kind of help from somewhere. I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way, but some nice things about this movie, Will Ashton. And I hate to say it, I mean, it looks gorgeous. I mean, I don't know if I think it was shot on film. And so
oh, really?
One of the first scenes, it's just like this really nice grainy aesthetic where, Melissa McCarthy's she works at a supermarket. Timothy Olyphant is her boss. I mean, sure, it doesn't make sense. He's too gorgeous to like be believable as like the middle manager of a grocery store in like middle America, but I don't care. It's Timothy Olyphant. I'll watch him in anything. But yeah, they're in this like sort of grainy environment. And you're like, man, is this going to be like a high level sort of like independent film that's going to just have some really sharp dialogue? And then you quickly understand that no, it's not. But at the same time, it's pretty easy to sort of just like let this one pass. I mean, it's not an egregiously bad movie. I think some people are probably being a little overly harsh because of the acclaim around it, I guess. But yeah, no, not a good movie, but it's not a disaster. It's just it's another really mediocre Netflix movie. What are you going to do?
Yeah. I looked it up. Yeah, it was shot on 35 millimeter, so you were correct. And I also found out that apparently this was a script going back to 2005. It was on the blacklist that year. If you don't know,
that's surprise.
That's like an industry list of like popular unproduced screenplays for a given year. At one point, I guess it was going to be a starring project for Keanu Reeves and Isla Fisher. This was like 2017 when a director named Dome Karokoski, I think, was going to do it, who was the guy who did that Tolkien movie, the J.R.R. Tolkien biopic where they couldn't mention Lord of the Rings. So they just have like characters doing LARPing for like random interludes. I never saw it, but I heard it was kind of weird. So I don't know. Yeah. Maybe this was never meant to be, but it also kind of sounds like the type of film based on the way you're describing it and the amount of stars are in it for short bursts. Maybe it's just one of those scripts that's just so dense and like so filled with characters and conflict that if you try to manage it down to like an hour and a half film, it gets too much and there's just too much to do or say or whatever. But it sounds like it was maybe even doomed from the start based on the way you're describing the writing. Basically, yeah. But they just still put it out anyway. And they tried to make it a thing. And it just doesn't quite work. I want to finish though, and I'm going a little long here. This is going to be super fast. Sex education.
I've talked about this show. I've talked about the show so much on Cinemaholics. It just hit its third season. And I know. We're talking about a show at the moment, and it's Cinemaholics. You can't watch Sex Education in the cinema unless, Will Ashton, you know something. Is your theater playing this? I don't think so.
Nope.
It should. I love Sex Education. It is one of my favorite shows playing right now. One of my all-time favorite shows at this point. It just finished its third season on Netflix. It is a British show. If you haven't heard about me talk about it before, it's a teen comedy drama. Nothing but dramedies this episode, but it's one of those British shows that is so smart and so creative and just so well written to what people are actually going through, specifically teenagers in today's environment. It's a very offbeat show. It's hard to wrap your head around the show in the first season, but as the seasons have gone on, it's evolved. It's gotten better and better. I mean, it is just so funny, so well done. Asa Butterfield, Gillian Anderson, Emma Mackey. The cast is amazing. It's one of those shows where even the villains are unbelievably well done, memorable characters that you can't, like, they're characters you hate in one season that become main characters in another season. It's that kind of thing where this show just thinks of everything. It has a killer soundtrack, such good storylines. I don't want to go into detail because I'm assuming a lot of people listening have never even seen the first season, but I'm just going to shortly declare here. Third season, it cements for me. This is the best teen show I have ever watched. I've seen a lot of teen shows. I've gone through the ringer. I'd say prior to this, one of the all-time best teen shows by my estimation was Freaks and Geeks. I've seen plenty that came out in yesteryear, and there's plenty of teen shows that, like, I consider guilty pleasures. I've loved things like Dawson's Creek, and I'm sure some people will say, I still really love this teen show from the 70s or something like that. Look, from what I've seen and what I've enjoyed throughout my life, and I love me some teen shows. I love teen shows as time capsules, that kind of just remind you this is what this generation was going through. Sex Education, I think, is the defining one for Gen Z. I think that's the case in a huge, profound way. I feel bad for millennials. I guess ours was like, what, Pretty Little Liars? That's a shame. But regardless, I mean, we get to still enjoy Sex Education as millennials because, it harkens back to just a current era and just a different way that society is changing. And change is scary, Will Ashton. I mean, sometimes I look at what the teens are doing on TikTok, I get scared. I'm like, things are changing so much. And, like, people have such different approaches and views of the world than ever before. And I love shows like this because it humanizes it. It brings it to everybody's level. You can watch this and be a little bit like, man, this is not what I went through in high school at all, but it's kind of cool. I kind of love it. There's this specific flavor the show goes for where, it's not super modern in terms of the kinds of cars people drive. Like, there's not a lot of cell phones in this. I mean, there's some, but, like, it's not all about social media. There isn't just, like, endless social media storylines and things that are very easily dated. This show has a very timeless appeal. It kind of exists in a world where, like, it's the present, but at the same time, it's sort of existing like, what if we had smartphones in the 90s? That's kind of what it does. And I don't know, it's so cool about that because when you watch it, you don't think about the time period. You don't think about, and I think that it works to the story's benefit because these, like, issues that people are dealing with, identification and, things like LGBT issues and all that stuff, it really, like, brings, like, a timelessness to it. It doesn't make it feel like, oh, this is only applicable to teens right now. There's, like, lines of dialogue in the third season that get to the heart of that of, like, hey, like, teenagers have always been dealing with this stuff. There's a character here played by Jemima Kirk. She's kind of like the villain of the season. And she's sort of like ranting against Gen Z sort of by proxy. And one of the characters is like, what you don't get is that, like, your generation went through this too. We're just, like, courageous enough to meet it head on. Right. And I love it. I just really love the backbone of this show. So I can't recommend it enough. Will Ashton has already promised that he's going to watch all 3 seasons, Will, you said, by the end of the week?
Not true. I don't know when I'll get around to this, if I ever
Someday,
get around to it. But I'm glad you get so much out of it.
I think it's a generational touchstone. I think everybody should check it out, especially people our age, because, I don't think it's necessarily something that's going to make you understand Gen Z, how, it's a show, right? But I think it's a great entryway, an entry point into that world and into understanding what people are going through right now and how it's similar to what you were and I went through when we were teens and all that stuff. So Great show. What little problems it has and flaws it has, yeah, it has a few. Who cares? I don't want to even talk about it. Why bother? It's a show. Of course it has problems and flaws. Like, it's not going to be perfect. That's not what I want. I don't want perfection. I want the sloppiness. Bring it. That's Sex Education, season 3. It's on Netflix. Highly recommend.
Hey, real quick, when you were at Sundance, did you see El Plantilla?
I did not. What is that?
That was one of the films that they showed. That was like one of the last films I saw, but I guess it came out this weekend. I didn't know if you wanted me to discuss that at all. Can
you say the name of it again?
It's Spanish. I might be mispronouncing it, but El Plantilla.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard of this.
We talked about it a little bit when I saw it. Here, I'll write it out for you to make sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm sure I'm not. But
you're writing it out?
Yeah, like in the chat.
Oh, El Planeta.
Yes.
I thought you were saying Plantilla.
I think I was.
The planet.
Yeah.
I've heard of it. Yeah. It was on like the TIFF, like thumbnail screen stuff. Yeah, I've heard of this movie. So you saw it when?
This is at Sundance. This is like one of the last films I saw at Sundance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was the directorial debut for Amandla Stenberg, I believe. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing her name.
Amalia Ullman, yeah.
Yeah, who's like, I think she was like an Instagram star that kind of like found some fame, and this is her like writing, directing, starring feature debut.
Yeah, she's around. She's around my age. She's from Argentina, I want to say.
Yes, that's correct. But this is like a little movie she made with her mother. It's a kind of like slice of life, low stakes, black and white character dramedy that she did. It's like only like 80 something minutes. And it was real charming. I thought it was a sweet little movie. I'm very curious to see what the audience response is. Assuming many people check it out. I know there were some folks that saw it at the festival that like really fell for it. I wish I had that level of enthusiasm for it, because it's the type of film that I really like. That's one's like personal, but also just kind of willing to just live in its own weird, specific little world where characters just kind of talk about real things, but they're not really like, heavy burdens put upon them or anything like that. They're just characters living their lives in a fairly casual and sweet-natured way. And it's a sweet little movie. I don't have too much more to say other than that, but since it came out, I just wanted to say that I saw that. I found it to be an amusing little delight, and I'm curious to see if Allman makes more movies in this vein, but I guess we'll have to wait to see.
Nice. So,
yeah.
All right.
A little extra
I didn't even know that it was out.
Yeah, I just found that out when I was looking up something else. So, yeah, I saw that, and I figured since I've seen it, I can talk about it real briefly and have something to say.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's been kind of on my radar. I haven't made like any sort of like, I should watch this, but I'm starting to feel like maybe I should have. Dang it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like one you would really, really like, I think. Like, I think you'd like it more than me. And not to say I disliked it at all, obviously, but I think it's like one that's really up your alley.
Yeah, especially because I really love Argentinian cinema, and I'm always down to check another one out, especially one that has such an artistic pedigree behind it, from what I've kind of like just seen and sort of from the periphery. So very, very stoked. I'll make sure that I make a point of it to get to that one by year's end. All right, well, we talked about the best. Let's talk about the rest. Let's talk about a movie. It's the big movie of the week, although I don't think it's making as big of a splash as Universal was probably hoping for. Let's talk about Dear Evan Hansen.
Dear Evan Hansen, today is going to be an amazing day, and here's why.
Have you been doing those letters to yourself with Dr. Sherman?
I've been trying to. Have you ever felt like nobody was there?
No one signed your cast. Now we can both pretend we have friends.
I'm sorry about my brother.
Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? I wish everything was different. Wish I was part of something. Wish that anything I said mattered. Have you ever felt like you could disappear?
Dear Evan Hansen.
Yeah, that's mine. I'll just take it. Wait, I need that back. Like you could fall, and no one would hear. Connor took a letter from me, and it was an assignment from my therapist.
Ew.
Even when the dark comes crashing through.
Connor's mother and stepfather are here to see you.
When you need a friend to carry you.
Connor wanted you to have this.
And when you're broken on the ground.
Dear Evan Hansen, he wrote it to you.
His last words, Connor took his own life.
You know what? I'm sorry Connor didn't write this.
No, please. What's this?
You will be found.
And we didn't think Connor had any friends.
All right, Dear Evan Hansen. It's a coming of age musical teen drama, and it is based on the stage musical that came out in 2016. It was made by the same person who did this screenplay. Stephen Levinson wrote it. Also did the screenplay of this movie. The songs and the lyrics are by Ben Pasek and Justin Paul. This movie, this adaptation, is directed by Steven Spatsky, which we already mentioned him, of course, early on in the intro of this show. Director of Perks of Being a Wallflower. Personal movie, one that I think you were saying earlier, you had creative involvement in.
I had no creative involvement, just to be clear, but I was very, very low on the totem pole. I was a
background artist, sandwich artist as well.
Sure, I did not make any sandwiches on set, but it was a very intimate set. Like I've had very, very limited experiences on movie or show sets. But from what I can tell, this one was like way more intimate than your average set. Like I got to meet some of the stars. I was like, even though I just showed up to be extra, like I was kind of more like in the thick of it with like the filmmakers and main people than your usual set. So it was a very cool experience. And it showed me that, how do you pronounce his last name? I forgot to check that beforehand. Is it?
The director?
Yes.
Steven Spatsky?
Chbosky. Okay. It just showed me he's a very passionate, warm, earnest guy. And I think he really cares about, like when he commits to something, I think he really cares a lot. And I think he puts his whole heart into his products. I think that was also true of Wonder, his follow-up film to Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I think that's also true to this film. But I think that in some unfortunate ways, that's to the movie's detriment.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, before we were talking about Dear Evan Hansen, I was talking about Sex Education, which is, for me, the best teen show ever made. And it's just so striking to have watched Dear Evan Hansen, a nearly 2.5-hour movie. In 2.5 hours, it has all of this time to tell a story about the teens, right?
Yeah, it is long.
It is very long. And it's so, like, in my review, I did a review of this movie for the young folks, and I said this movie should have been made in 2012, not 2021. They got the dates wrong. They looked at the dates and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to make this in 2021. And no, flip the 1 and 2.
I think it was actually for cinemaholics.com that you wrote the review.
That's what I said.
Oh, I thought you said the young folks. I think you said the young folks, but I could be wrong. Maybe I missed.
I did it for Cinemaholics.
There you go.
Yeah, Katie Stoltzel did it for theyoungfolks.com. Okay. And she actually was kind of similar to me on this movie. But yeah, we'll get into that. But yeah, no, I just think this movie, I was like, what? This feels so old. Like, I know everybody's making the jokes. They're like, okay, so this stars Ben Platt. Ben Platt, who we've seen in shows like The Politician. We've seen him in movies too and everything. He's been around. He's been doing stuff. He's been making things. He was in the stage musical. He was like the lead when this opened on Broadway, right? And we saw him in Pitch Perfect too. I like this guy. I think he's so good. He makes something terrible like The Politician on Netflix watchable because he has a really great voice. I think he has a really good presence, and I think he sells dialogue pretty well. I didn't see Ricky in the Flash. I know he was in that too, though. So that said, I'm watching this movie, Dear Evan Hansen, and I'm like, Ben, you're better than this. Don't be a has-been.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, man.
You don't think he's better than this?
I'm not saying
he's right where he belongs.
Well, it's not that. I just think he is not without blame. Like, I think so. I mean, I find it weird calling this like a Stephen Chbosky movie because I see it more as a Mark Platt production. Because Mark Platt is Ben Platt's father, I don't really know about like what happened behind the scenes, but I have to assume because this was such a big Tony Award-winning musical with his son involved. I'm assuming he also produced the musical because he was like a big Broadway producer for Wicked as well. And he's been trying to get the Wicked movie off the ground for however many years. I just feel like he saw this as a way to kind of, his son won the Tony, he won a Golden Globe, he won an Emmy for something else. He was like, okay, if you nail this, we got an Oscar winner and you are an EGOT. And it just felt like him and Ben Platt have a very cynical look at what this movie should be. And I feel like their involvement was probably crucial to the success of the original show and was also probably the biggest deterrent for what made this movie not very good.
I think that's I think that's a very defensible take. I wouldn't be surprised if you were right. I want to clear up. I don't think Mark Platt was a producer of the musical. I know he was a producer of Wicked. I'm pretty sure about that, but I don't think he produced that. I know that. Okay, here's some other films he produced: Trial of Chicago 7, most recent, right?
Yes.
Bridge of Spies,
Yeah.
Killer Picture. Love
he did
Bridge of Spies.
La La Land.
La
right?
La Land.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I was saving that one for last because
Sure.
it's the musical, right?
Yeah, and that has the songwriters as well. I think
I think yeah, you can understand hey, look, you can understand his buy-in to trying to make this movie a big Oscar push, right? Because I mean, all three of those movies, I think, were nominated for Best Picture, right? Bridge of Spies, particularly, I know
Yes.
Mark Rylance won the award.
Mhm.
La La Land almost won Best Picture, infamously.
It won
Chicago
for
7. It was there.
Yeah, it won for like 2 minutes or whatever. Yeah.
It had its time. So you see Dear Evan Hansen, and you're like, okay, well, he's going for it again, right? And I think he's also producer of a little movie that I think you like more than any other, right?
Is that true?
Aladdin.
Oh, did he do the new Aladdin?
Executive producer.
Oh
Yeah.
man, that movie almost put me asleep.
Yeah, he's producer. I think he also produced Cruella, which I think your favorite movie of 2021.
No, but I was gonna save my Cruella comment for towards the end of the review.
All right, I'll actually be totally honest. It is kind of weird how most of the movies he's produced are not good. Because I was looking into this earlier. He produced like Mary Poppins Returns, which I don't think is a bad movie, but definitely not as good as it should have been.
Yeah, you're a big fan of that one, right? Yeah, you
I liked it in spite of itself.
Sure.
That's one of the better ones, though. I mean, he did Girl on the Train, Hotel Artemis, Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk.
Yeah.
Happily Ever After. One of the worst movies of the year so far, Thunder Force. Bet you forgot about that
he did that one too?
He did. Well, producer. He's the producer in The Little Mermaid, which is a couple years from now. And a movie coming out next year called Legally Blonde 3, which I think that'll probably be the next Best Picture winner. Yeah.
Wasn't one of his like first big producing credits on the first Legally Blonde?
Yeah, both of them.
Yes.
He produced Legally Blonde and Legally Blonde 2, Red, White, and Blonde. So there you go.
Yeah.
You know what? There is another movie he did that I really liked. A couple of them. So the other two movies, the three movies that are really good. Drive. Love Drive. Great film.
The Ryan Gosling Drive?
The Ryan Gosling Drive. He also produced Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Sure.
One of my favorite films of the last decade.
Yeah, started that last decade strong. Drive and Scott Pilgrim, yeah.
He did Wanted. He did Rachel Getting Married. He has some good stuff, but most of his good stuff's like the first decade, you know?
Yeah.
Like Legally Blonde and all those. I think this last decade has been way more hit or miss.
I don't know. Rachel Getting Married might be the best one of the ones you listed there, but
I'd say La La Land is probably for me. La La Land or Drive. But I hear you. Rachel Getting Married. Great
I love that movie.
Picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we're not here to talk about Mark Platt. It's kind of funny. We've never talked about Mark Platt much on the show. But anyway, this movie stars Ben Platt, as we mentioned, Kaitlyn Dever, Amandla Stenberg, Colton Ryan, Danny Pino, Amy Adams, Julianne Moore. It's got a high pedigree. They clearly were like, this can be 2.5 hours. You know why? It's a big awards contender. People will sit through it.
Yeah, it's the type of movie like on paper it makes sense why Universal saw this and it's like, oh, like they're rubbing their hands. Like we got one for the ages. We got Ben Platt returning to his Tony-winning role. We got Stephen Chomsky, or however you pronounce his last name. You know, he made, like a very well-liked movie about similar topics 10 years prior with Perks Being Wallflower. It's very easy to see why they went to him to do this. You know, you got the songwriters from La La Land, like we mentioned. And I think The Greatest Showman, I think they also did that as well. And it's just like, okay, yeah.
Yep.
Bang, bang, bang. If this is a hit, like, and that's not even counting like Amy Adams, Julianne Moore, Amandla Stenberg, Kaitlyn Dever, like, a very credible cast of very talented people. If this was a slam dunk, it was like, yeah, that would be a very easy Oscar contender. But, some things that work on paper do not work on the screen.
It makes so much. Yeah, it's just like you said. It's like the Avengers of Oscar awards ingredients. It's like, well, hey, what's like a big thing? Everybody really they love musicals, right? I mean, musicals are tried and true. Okay, we got that. We have Oscar baity subject matter. This movie is very much about mental health. It's about suicide. The whole plot of this movie is that Evan Hansen is a depressed teenager who, during therapy, writes letters to himself. He says, "Dear Evan Hansen," and he writes a letter one day about how he's kind of hinting at that he wishes he could just disappear. He's having dark suicidal thoughts. His letter to himself gets snatched away by a similarly outcasted teen with a lot of anxiety named Connor. This is the character played by Colton Ryan. And he takes the note, and we never find out the details of it, but he ends up committing suicide. It's very early in the film. And everyone thinks because he had the note on him that he wrote that letter for Evan Hansen, and they believe Evan is this guy's friend. And this movie kind of has like, it really wants you to believe Evan has no friends in a way that I found very, like, I struggle with this. I go back and forth. Did they try too much? Like, he has 0 friends. Like, his own mom doesn't want to hang out with him. And I was like,
well, his mom worked. I don't think she chooses to not hang out with him.
I don't know. Well, there were times in the movie where I was like, I think she took an extra shift when she didn't need to. I mean, I know the movie's trying to present it in a way of like, it's because, you know, she's a struggling single mom, and so she's doing what she can to like take care of the house. So I'm being a little bit facetious. But also, it comes off that way.
It's worth mentioning he has an arm cast, and Connor was the only one to write his name on his cast, which also leads, in the parents' view, some credence to him having formed a fond friendship with what's his name, Connor.
Yeah, but see, this is the thing about this movie. Nobody would sign his cast. Nobody. He has like one kind of friend who's just like a family friend, played by Nick Dodani.
Yes.
And I'm just like, why are you so mean to, like, Evan just seems kind of like whatever. Like, I don't know. He doesn't seem very cool or anything, but like people are just like go out of their way to just be mean to him. I don't get it.
Well, this is high school, man. Like I didn't have, of all the things I found far-fetched or unbelievable, I did not have any issue believing that no one wanted to spend time with Evan Hansen, because Evan Hansen, as played by Ben Platt in this movie, is like unsettlingly unhinged in every single shot. Like he has like these nervous
you mean unhinged
tics.
in appearance?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is a classic example of like how one thing from one medium cannot work in another. In that, like, I feel like from a creative standpoint, everyone just went to Ben Platt, adored on Broadway for how many years he played this role. Like, he won a Tony. He's great. We'll just put cameras on him and it will work wonders. Like, the magic will come alive. And not only is the age thing distracting, but like, it just seems like his performance wasn't intuitively changed for this new medium. And we have a performance that's meant to be for a wide audience on a stage where he's like, you know, playing to the crowds, like, you know, playing to the aisles. And we have instead this presentation from Stephen Chbosky where everything is very intimate, a lot of like close-ups and medium shots, where I think the approach is very interesting for a musical, where it's like, it's not a lot of like big breakout musical numbers. There are a few, but for the most part, it's very character focused and intimate. But because the performance from Ben Platt is going so broad and so big, it counteracts it and makes him look like this weirdo, this like creep who's like on the nerves of like gonna like erupt at any minute. Like, it looks like he's just gonna like blow up at any given
The writing
second.
supports it. The writing supports it because he is he's a sociopath.
Yes.
Like a sociopath who insists that, oh, I don't want to do this monstrous thing. Then he does it seemingly unquestioningly. You know, like they put in little bits of dialogue of like, oh, I don't want this to happen. Proceeds to be a monster for 20 minutes straight.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like, I don't think the story is completely the fault, because you can have a complex, nuanced story like this and have it work. Case in point, 2009's World's Greatest Dad, which has a very similar premise, and it's very good because the movie acknowledges through Robin Williams' performance that he is this complicated figure who has, he's a guy who like what he's doing isn't right, and the movie doesn't make any bones about him doing a bad thing, but we can kind of see through his perspective why he goes through with these steps and like what he's feeling in that moment and the kind of complicated feelings he feels where he's being validated, but at the same time he's going through this great tragedy and he's doing under false pretenses on this stuff. And it's like a very interesting film and a very funny and darkly amusing film, but at the same time, like it's a similar premise that I think works because Bobcat Goldthwait knew what film he was making. He tuned it to the right dial. And this movie is going in the opposite direction. It's very, very sincere, very maudlin in its approach. But at the same time, there is this kind of cynical edge, like I was saying before, from the Platts, I feel, where they're trying to goat this story about, mental health issues in a way that feels, kind of cheap and cynical. And so it has this kind of weird, bizarro feel to it throughout the whole thing.
Movies are made for this. You're so right. Because how many movies have we seen where characters, when you really break it down, are monsters? If this thing didn't happen with a lot of other movies we otherwise like, Crack.com wouldn't exist. What would their videos be about? Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like any 80s movie, like how many articles are there online? Like, actually, The Breakfast Club is problematic or whatever. It's, yeah, sure. Right.
Yeah, because that's the thing is like you just have to break it down. It's like, oh, I never saw it from that perspective. But this movie, the perspective is so stilted. It's like turned on its head. So all you can think about is what you're not supposed to think about. It's almost like it's inviting audiences to be behind the curtain for once. So none of the movie magic there is there to sort of fool you into being like, wait a minute. I mean, because that's the whole thing with this movie is like Evan chooses to manipulate and lie to this grieving family whose son has just committed suicide, to lie that he was best friends with their son and then offer meaningless, hollow lies of sympathy to try to make them feel better only because it makes him feel good. And it's like, you can't get around that. And a lot of bones are being made, of course, by the fact that, yes, he does look too old for the part. And it's weird because the man's 28, right? Ben Platt.
Is he? Yeah, I think he just turned 28.
He's 28.
He was 27, I think, when he filmed the film. So
either way, I think that we've seen older people, like people around his age, which I shouldn't say older. I mean, I'm older than him.
Yes.
But two things on that. First of all, the politician got away with it. The politician, I think he's like 25, 26.
Sure.
Barely notice it. It's fine because they just found a way. Like you buy it. There's some actors like Jessica Barden. She still is playing high school. I think she's around his age. I think she's 30.
Yeah, I think she's around your age, but a lot of the roles we've seen her in, she was like, because like Ben Platt is about my age. He's a little bit younger than me. And right. I find, as we mentioned with several Jessica Barden films, like I cannot imagine being an actor and playing a high schooler again. But oftentimes Jessica Barden is able to sell it, primarily I think because she looks younger, but also just like she, I think, is able to give performances that feel more natural and more ingrained to those characters. And this performance is so theatrical, so overdone from not only a performance standpoint, but from like a makeup and lighting and all this perspective that like it's clear that they're so self-conscious about it that they overdid it to the point where he just looks like he doesn't look like a normal person. He just looks like a federal agent, like a 21 Jump Street thing where he's like posing as a high schooler.
I'll admit though, like it's not something about the movie that bothered me all the way through. It's something that I was just like, yeah, they didn't do a good job at this. I think that they tried to make him look too much like an outcast because like Ben Platt is I don't think Ben Platt is a bad looking man. And I think they try to make him look more unseemly, I guess, like the afroed hair and just his hunch and all this stuff to try to make him look younger. I think it has the opposite effect. It makes him look older than he actually is in real life. Like I genuinely believe that. And you know what? It didn't kill them. That's not what killed the movie for me because I was just like, well, fine. I can still appreciate this movie regardless of this because I guess that's the point. He's supposed to sort of be a pariah. Fine. Okay. Give me the movie. Let's see what else we get. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing that I like about the movie. It's probably what keeps me from hating this movie. I mean, I hate things about this movie. I absolutely hate many things about this movie, in fact. But there are some things about it that I do like. I think that it is a good idea. I mean, look at the Broadway play is evidence of that, of the writing, of, at least the general concept could be done in a way that works if they made several notable tweaks to how things turn out. But I think that just the general idea of like an awkward teenager singing his troubles and the fact that the music is actually really good, I think, yeah, that stuff works for me. Like I'm watching this movie and I like the music. I think that there is something to like a teenager who can't really articulate what he's feeling, kind of expressing it through song. That stuff actually works the way that it's intended to because I think it's straight out of the play and I think Ben Platt sings really well. And, whenever the characters are kind of having those moments, it's a little bit easier to kind of get into the film's vibe. But then it's all the other stuff. It's how the movie completely disregards Connor. And who I think is a very important character who gets horribly mistreated. And I think it's a symptom of how dated the play is at this point too. I think the play was very dated for 2016, a few years dated. And so that's even more agitated by the fact that it's so many years after the musical came out. And then I think that if you're going to make this movie, I think you really have to just really rewrite it. I think that Stephen Levinson was the wrong person to do the screenplay. I think that they should have had him maybe do a first draft and bring somebody else to freshen up this material and iron out just a lot of the messed up stuff that happens in this because it's bleak. It's oppressive. Like by the time that this movie ends, I feel like, what's the point of that? Like, why did I just have to go through that? Like, I wrote this in my review. I was just like, am I just supposed to feel misery? Like, what kind of movie sets out to just make you feel bad? And that's what this movie ultimately does. And it tries to dress it up with empowerment and all this stuff. It tries to make the Amandla Stenberg character more likable, I believe, than she is in the Broadway play. But none of it goes anywhere. And I just think that, yeah, the end result is like all of these characters go through something horrible. And I don't think any of them come out the other side better. So it's just like, that's not what movies are for. Especially like if you're going to do a movie about these really dark subject matters, I think, you owe it to sort of inject something in here that's hopeful, because this is really serious stuff. And yeah, I just think this movie is very irresponsible in that way.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of go off a few of your points, I think the approach of the film was right, but the execution was wrong. Like, I think, like I said before, I like the idea of doing a very intimate, grounded musical where it's very character focused. It's having characters in very raw, tender ways, expressing their inner emotions, talking about things that burden them in a mental health sort of way, especially relating to depression and anxiety. I think that's a very intriguing concept for a musical. And I think there are a few scenes in this where it gets interesting in that perspective. But as you're mentioning, I think they need to make a few crucial changes from stage to screen that they don't do. The few changes they do make, I think, are ultimately more detrimental than not. For instance, Amandla, what's your last name again? Amandla from The Hate You Give. Stenberg, yes.
Amandla Stenberg, yeah.
Amandla Stenberg. They give her, I think, one new musical number, the swing set musical number, where we're kind of supposed to...
And I liked it, but it doesn't work.
I think it was one of the better songs in the movie. I'm going to push against you as far as I don't think the music in this is that good. I think it's decently well performed. Like, I think Ben Platt's a good singer and all that, but I think every musical number sounds more or less the same, and it gives a movie a sort of monotonous feel to it.
But I think it's all the same, but I think it's all like kind of catchy. Like, I don't know. None of the music, I was just like, music again. If anything, I invited it because it was better than the dialogue. It might be a curve thing,
I can only really hum like the one like You'll Be Found song. Like, I can't really remember the beats and the music for any of the other songs that well. And I've been having to listen to it throughout this whole weekend because it's at the theater. And I still can't really remember like the lyrics and music.
Yeah.
But
it's not amazing or anything like that. So yeah.
But with Amandla Stenberg's character, I think they try to, from what I can tell, like her character is a lot more self-centered, I guess, in the show, or decisions she makes in the second half of the movie, without getting spoilers, are more for her own personal interests. And I think they try with this song to kind of justify as far as like, oh, she's also dealing with her own mental health issues. But I think because the movie is so fairly blasé about the struggles of mental health issues, it seems to almost backfire as far as like being like, oh, like these people are like, they're unstable because like they have like these issues, or because they're on medication, or all these different things. And I feel like that's a really, really bad, harmful message to give for a musical like this that's trying to be open-hearted about these difficulties and show the complexity of people with that, especially high schoolers that deal with mental health issues. And I think that's where I'm most antagonistic about the film, because I feel like that's an incredibly detrimental message to give. And I think that's where the movie fumbles the most, outside of just the age thing and the poor execution of the story and all that. I think that's where the movie is really genuinely potentially harmful. And I find that's where I think I'm ultimately more negative than not on the film.
Yeah, and I don't blame you at all. I think, man, the better version of this movie, in my opinion, is really centering Kaitlyn Dever's character as the main character. I think that there is something really prescient and relatable about being in this situation and being surrounded by people who pretend like they knew the person, right? Like that's the hook. The hook of this movie is sort of, because like, I think, I don't know about you, but like I've been in that situation where people sort of like exaggerate and embellish how much they knew somebody who just recently passed away.
Yeah.
And how for the person who was close to them, how much that hurts to sort of just see this like rewriting of history, especially when it relates to like the reasons, like what led Connor to doing what he did. It's pretty complicated. And, the movie doesn't have easy answers on, was it because people treated him badly? Was it because, was it a mix of things? Like was he antagonistic toward others? Was it mental health? Like what was it that was ailing Connor? This movie's not interested in any of that. And it's more interested in what's going to happen with Evan. Yeah. And I think for us, it's like, who cares about Evan? Like the dude's lying out of his teeth. Mm-hmm. He's just trying to feel like he's trying to feel like some sort of like closeness with, he's trying to like date, Connor's sister, who's this character. And it doesn't work. Like, it's just so messed up and so monstrous. And I think that the movie's heart has there's a better way in here with her and maybe the Amandla Stenberg character, who we see some of that, right? We see that she deals with a lot of these mental health issues as well. And she's trying to sort of like make all this hay about Connor, who she didn't know. And I think like a story with those characters would have made way more sense, but we can't have that. We have to have a straight adaptation. Evan Hansen has to be like the person. And it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think about it, but if we did have it from her perspective and say we saw like this loner girl who has a brother who's complicated, has his own share of mental health issues. We find out he has committed suicide. She's dealing with the struggle. She finds out there's another kid from her class that can relate to this. They form a relationship. Midway through the film, we find out, shockingly, he lied about the whole thing. He's actually wasn't really close. There was just some complicated issue, and we followed their fallout from that. That would be, I think, more interesting than what we got here. However, that's obviously not the film we got, so oh well. But I do agree with you that Kaitlyn Dever, I think of all the performances here, is probably my favorite. I did also enjoy Amandla Stenberg. I thought she did a good job in spite of the material. And I also thought I don't know the actor's name, but the father of Connor,
Danny Pino.
Yeah, I don't think he doesn't get a lot to do in this. I think he gets more in the show from what I've heard. He's kind of underwritten in the movie, but I thought he was better than the material more often than not. The performance I found...
I would say so. He should do more movies. I mean, he's been in like a lot of TV stuff, like Sons of Anarchy. So yeah. Heck yeah, let's get him in more films.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not as familiar with him outside of this film. I mean, I might have seen him in other things and didn't realize it. But the performance I was surprised that didn't really work for me, and I feel bad because she's on a bit of a losing streak right now, is Amy Adams, who I thought she would bring a lot of nuance and complexity because this is the type of role she usually excels at. But I thought her performance was unfortunately fairly one note and lacking in many different respects.
Very one note. Yeah, it's the same thing over and over again with her character. There's no nuance. There's no depth. There's no scene where you're just like, like basic writing 101 is when you have a character and you introduce this character to the audience and the circumstances, they make you think this character is one thing. And if you know what you're doing in a screenplay or a novel or anything, the best way to get the audience to really care for this character and to like sync up with them is to do something unexpected with the character. Instead of her reacting one way, she reacts some way that you totally don't expect, but that feels tied to what she's actually gone through, because then it's a two thing. You feel for her emotionally and you learn more about the character. That never happens with Amy Adams' character. I think it's all the writing. She's written to just be a grieving mother. Grieving mother, grieving mother. This scene, she's the grieving mother. This scene, she's the grieving mother. This scene, she's the grieving mother with an extra line of dialogue. And it's just repetitive and safe, right? And that's where it just doesn't work.
She did make a pie, so we can't forget that.
Oh, oops, I forgot about that, yeah.
Yes, she made
that was unexpected.
A pie that was, what was it, gluten-free or whatever. That was like the whole thing with their character.
Yeah. They impugn her quite a bit in this movie. They're pretty harsh on her for all of her, like, there's also like some class warfare stuff they try to throw in here. Whatever. None of that stuff belonged. It all just totally rang untrue to me. It's like they're trying to bring it up like Evan Hansen and his mom are working class heroes. Their house looks nice too. They look like they're just like upper middle class-ish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. There was never any attention paid to like, okay, show us their struggle. Show us that, like, prove to me that like Julianne Moore's character needs to take these extra shifts, because otherwise she cooks them like a full breakfast in like her introductory scene, and like they live pretty comfortably. So like if you want to sell that whole thing of like, no, they're struggling and it's hard and like he can't afford really nice clothes, like I don't know, they just don't try to do any of that stuff.
Also, like their house is like very neat and clean and organized as well, and all that stuff
for two people.
Yeah. 2 people.
A house for 2 people. Yeah, that's like pretty well done, well kept. There's, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I find kind of frustrating about the film is that like Stephen Chbosky, at least from his first film, and I think in some respect his second film, like he's pretty good about making like characters who, I mean, not are super realistic as far as like the execution. It's sentimental in its approach. It's obviously very nostalgic, Perks Being Wildflower, but I think he's very good about making even like some starry performance feel fairly lived in and have some personal resonance in a way that feels emotionally yearning, or it has like some emotional honesty to it that really strikes home for a lot of people. And I think that's one of the key reasons why Perks Being Wallflower became something of a like cult classic or whatever you want to call it.
You feel like you're in their lives. Like I feel like I'm in Emma Watson's character's life.
Yeah.
And when all the things happen with her character, even though you're rooting for something to happen and it doesn't happen, you love these characters anyway. Like there is like a little bit of a spark to that. And I think it comes from how personal that film was to him. And I think, when he's directing somebody else's screenplay, I think that I do think he's trying, but it's just, I think a lot of this movie is too glossy. It's too overdone. And I mean, this movie had a $28 million budget. This movie should have had half that as a budget, considering like what it is. There's no huge dance numbers. There's no there's like what 3 or 4 main locations on set. Like, I don't understand what they spent their money on besides, I guess, the actors themselves. But probably. Probably that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, I know this movie was filmed during COVID, and I know that was part of the reason for some of the intimacy of the film. Like, what they couldn't do as much with actors, I guess. They did as much as they could, like with single shots and all that, from what I've read.
Yeah. They were filming this. If I recall, they filmed this like last August. Yeah. So like, height of the pandemic.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think one thing I have against film is that like, not only do the songs have a kind of samey feel to it, but I feel like the songs don't fully gel with the plot. Like it feels like it's a drama, and then it just inexplicably characters will start singing, and it's like now it's a musical number, now it's a drama again. And it didn't feel, at least to me, like it flowed together in a way that really made either the drama or the musical elements complement or parallel one another. Okay. And I feel like I'd
say it works half the time. Half the time they do it, half the time it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I just felt like, for the most part, it's kind of like that tree scene where like Evan Hansen is shouting, singing to a tree, and it's just bizarre and weird. And he's like, looks like he's gonna like explode, as I've mentioned before. And it's just like a very bizarre scene. And like I said, I think that's what I'm trying to say before, is that like, I think the approach, it makes sense. Like, I think if they could blend those two elements together, if they could give a performance from our lead actor that felt more organic and realized in a authentic way, and if we could get the material to really have that complexity and nuance that felt stronger for the characterizations, I think this would have been a really sensational musical film. But I just feel like that all these concurrent things don't complement each other, and it becomes ultimately a bit of a mess, but not like a disaster. I think in some ways people are making it out to be. I think it's, for the most part, kind of a tedious film, but I think discussing all the things that don't work are kind of fascinating.
Right. Yeah. Like you can find so many things about it to criticize, and it's weird because it's not the sum of all of those criticisms, at least for me. Like like one of the big things is that I think that the romance between Evan Hansen and Kaitlyn Dever's character, I don't buy it at all. Like,
that was
there's no chemistry whatsoever. Like, why would it just doesn't, like, just 1 second she can't stand him, 1 second the script says that she likes him, and like none of it works. Like in their relationship, all of that, take it out of the movie, please.
Right. Well, I mean, that's like where the age stuff is as most egregious, because like, I mean, they are, I believe, like only 3 years apart. I think he was 27. That might be 4 years. I think she was like 23 when she filmed this, and he was 27. So it's not like they're like terribly far away in age. I mean, it's like a bit of a gap.
They're 4 years apart. Yeah, she's like 24.
But yeah, it just made me wonder, like, do people do screen tests anymore? Like, is that a thing that still happens? Because like, if you watch this, like instantly you're just like, no, why is this older guy leering on this younger woman? It reads horribly. Well,
it's not even that. It's not even the acting of it. For me, it's the writing. It's just sort of like, what series of events really brings her to look at this guy in a romantic way? Because like all of the scenes leading up to this are so awkward. They're so antagonistic. There's like, she's grieving. Like, what in the world is attracting her to him? Especially when it comes to the point where like everything he knows about her is through her brother. Yeah. Like, I don't know, it's just gross. Like, I don't know, none of that stuff. Like, if I had to pick anything about this movie to take out and I couldn't pick anything else, it's that stuff. Like, it's just, it was gross. Like every time they were interacting, I was like, please stop. Like it doesn't work. Like this movie would have worked much better if it had been a platonic friendship. He obviously wants more than that, but he's reveling in having this close connection that is growing. Maybe it could be romantic eventually, but like it gets stopped short. Instead, they go full on like, oh, they're dating and everything, and it's like, it's so unbelievable. I think that he almost has more chemistry with Amandla Stenberg, but not by much. So yeah, it doesn't work for me at all.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think with the music and everything, yeah, that stuff didn't bother me as much as it seemed to have bothered you. I just think, man, this movie, like, we already mentioned it, it's too long, and I was hanging by a thread with this movie. I was just like, movie, you have enough going on that I'm not going to hate you, that I'm not going to just sort of like declare from the heavens the end of your existence by my sword. And then it does the unthinkable. It does something that is so lazy, that is just so like, oh my word, is it 10 years ago again? It does the viral subplot. Something goes viral. Are you kidding me? How many times do we have to go through this, Hollywood? You don't understand virality. You don't understand what makes things go viral. I can tell you what's not going to go viral. This dumb kid's speech. Are you like, you won't believe what happened next is literally in this movie. And people are trying to be like, this is an Oscar contender. I reject it completely. Like when this thing goes viral and there's even a montage, an unforgivable montage where Evan Hansen is like, it's got 1 million views, 2 million views. No, it doesn't. It has 10 or 15, maybe. And that's like the parents of like the people involved watching this. It turns into a whole thing. The Connor Project. Like at that point in the movie, I was just like, go away, stop, like end now. Like, I don't know if the whole virality thing happens in the actual like stage play.
It does, yeah.
But it's so lame. Like, it's too lame to even contemplate for me.
I believe the Viagra, or whatever I was trying to say, the viral aspect,
Viagra.
Sure. Which is, I guess, what Evan Hansen needs if he's whatever, like 45 years old or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I believe, because from what I've read or what I've seen, like the stage production is very like kind of stripped down, but like there are like screens in the background, and you like kind of see the Twitter posts and all this stuff flying whenever like the crux of the story kind of comes into play, and it adds, I guess, the internalization of Evan Hansen, like the like overwhelming sensation of just like getting all this attention, feeling kind of like the center of the universe and all that stuff, which I think maybe it just really works well on stage. I don't know. I haven't seen the stage production. I don't know how to compare it to that, but in film it just kind of reads as kind of hacky and we've been there, done that with this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's this weird like wish fulfillment of, I don't know, this like, we control the internet is predictable. And I love it when films do the opposite, where like something happens and they say it's gone viral and it's like it has 1,000 views.
Yeah,
that's when my ears perk up. I was like, oh, here's a writer who knows what's up.
Right.
That to me is the best. But yeah, whenever, like, that's something I loved about 8th grade. It's just that, like, she never goes viral.
Yeah.
Like, a lesser screenwriter would have been like, oh, but then she's going to have a video that has like 1 million views, and then we get to do this whole other thing. But then you should see Bo Burnham being like, no.
Right. You
don't understand what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Yes, that's Dear Evan Hansen. I have nothing else to say about this movie. It sucks. Don't watch it. But, you know, if you do watch it, like, I don't think don't expect like the biggest disaster of your life or anything. It's just bad. Like, why would you give it the time of day?
Yeah. So I'm kind of familiar with the Rotten Tomatoes versus audience score. I know there's a big. The only reason is because like it keep coming up. Like people would bring it up at the theater. Like patrons would come in and be like, "Oh, it has like whatever, like a 32% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it has like a 84% on the audience side of it." I don't know if that's the exact numbers, but I know it was like.
So for listeners who don't know, we play a little game every week these days where Will Ashton gets to guess what the score is. And it's 33% now. But the audience score, what did you think it was?
I heard it was pretty high. Like it was like, I heard it was like in the 80s or something like that. Maybe I just missed, I mean, I don't know. I didn't look for it myself, but I heard it was like in the higher end of things.
Go ahead, give your guess. What's your guess?
Let's say 85%.
90.
90%? Okay.
90% audience score and it has over 500 verified ratings, so it's not an anomaly. So,
and I mean, I will
what
say,
to do? Yeah,
I mean, I will say, like, at least for the small handful of people that came to our theater reopening, and that I saw coming in and out of the film and talked about with people are responding to it. At least the people who came out to see it this weekend. So I don't know.
What were they saying? What's the cinema score at the Pittsburgh theater where you work at? I don't want to dox it.
A lot of
people to know it.
A lot of people came out crying. A lot of people were like, "Oh, this is a touching film."
Man.
And they were moved by it. Like it's hard to argue if someone's crying. I mean, unless they were like
Was
laughing.
it the cast? Like, did you just see Ben Platt himself coming out? Like,
I don't know. I mean, it's a very. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that Stephen Chomsky? I think he made a very earnest film. Like, I think the Platts might have been more cynical in what they were trying to do with this. I don't think he was. I mean, I don't want to believe that he had cynical intentions with the film. I think everything he's done before this suggests that I think he had his heart in the right place. I think he wanted to tell a very nuanced, character-driven film about an isolated high schooler who is in this predicament, and he kind of gets in over his head. But yeah, I think, like we said, it makes sense on paper why this could have worked or why Universal thought they had a slam dunk. And I think the execution just betrayed them in pretty much every step leading up to its release. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't really fond of the music, as we mentioned. It sounded very much, and I don't mean this as a slight so much, but it will be perceived as one. It felt kind of like Christian rock to me throughout the whole film. And it had like this kind of bland, inspirational feel to it
that's kind of funny.
Yeah,
I like that.
But I just think the execution of this is wrong. Like, I think the intent or like how they were focusing on the film in terms of like making it more intimate and character focused makes sense, but it either needs to be sincere but way more complicated about the characters, or it need to be like this but darkly amusing, like acknowledging that the characters are assholes and just playing that up to the nine. But if they did that, they would have just remade World's Greatest Dad. So I don't know.
All right. Well, okay. So we already said 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's out of 173 critics. And then 90% audience score, really, really high. What do you think the cinema score is, though? What do you think the people in Vegas gave this one when all was said and done?
I'm gonna go. It might be A, but I don't know. I'm gonna say B plus.
A minus. You should have split the difference.
Yeah.
A minus for this movie. That's pretty funny. But hey, yeah, I think you're spot on in that estimation. Yeah, I think this is one of those movies people are going to watch and they're going to be like, oh yeah, that was kind of nice. They're going to have a reaction to it, but it's not going to, I don't think this movie's going to last a test of time. I don't think it's actually going to impact people in any meaningful way. I mean, some people for sure, but not in a way that I think is going to be like long lasting.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. So,
well, I do think the people that showed up for opening weekend were fans of the musical. They have pre-existing history with the material. So maybe they're looking at it with rose-colored glasses and they're seeing the musical and they're just like, it's just like the thing, but on the screen. But
that is one thing. Yeah. I mean, if there were people who were fans of the musical who watched it and liked it too, hey, that is a plus for this movie.
Sure.
That they, for better or worse, they stuck close to what ostensibly worked in the first place.
Yeah.
Even though for a lot of other people, it probably won't.
Was the
for us.
Was the one song in the musical the like kind of like more upbeat, darkly comedic one? That felt like something.
You're gonna be way more specific.
The email one.
Yes, that was probably my favorite. Sincerely Me.
I guess I don't know. That's like the only one that felt inspired compared to the other ones.
That was a good time. That was kind of like I was going, oh, I'm into this. That's the one where Colton Ryan actually gets to do something.
I guess yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, he's, I think, only a year younger than Ben Platt, but he feels like a way more believable high schooler. And I feel like if
I think you're right. Yeah, he's in his mid-20s, but yeah, it's like he looks. That's the thing. They didn't put tons of makeup on him. They didn't do a ton of things to try to make him look younger. Exactly. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah,
at least it seems that way.
That's what I felt, at least. So yeah.
All right. Well, that's Dear Evan Hansen. We didn't like it. Will and I are not about this movie. We're saying, Dear Evan Hansen, sincerely, not us.
Return to sender.
John and Will. Return to sender. Thank you. It's out now in theaters. It's, as we mentioned before, too long, 2.5 hours or whatever it is. 2 hours and 18 minutes, if I'm recalling. Way too long. But you can watch it right now in theaters if you are so inclined. And that's all we have for you this week. Next week, we're talking about Venom, Let There Be Carnage. It's probably going to be our big review. We're also going to talk about The Many Saints of Newark, the prequel to The Sopranos, which Will has been preparing for by watching all The Sopranos for the first time. I haven't seen any of it. We're going to have an interesting cast on that one. We might also talk about The Addams Family too, which I'm supposed to see today. We're also hoping to cover The Guilty, the new Jake Gyllenhaal movie, and Titane, or Titane, or however you pronounce it. The follow-up film from the director of Raw, which was one of Will's favorite films from a few years ago.
Love that movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the newest one from, I don't know how to pronounce her name.
I'm not familiar with that either.
But
Julia
Durkernau? I think she's French.
Yeah, so she's definitely French. I didn't want to disrespect her by mispronouncing
I don't either.
Yeah.
Yes, she is the wonderful Julia D. Initial. She's great.
Yes.
So yeah. But until then, that's it for us from this week. Don't forget to check out It Ain't Ogre Till It's Ogre.
Yeah.
For Will Ashton.
Thank you.
For me, I got nothing going on. Follow me on Twitter, I guess. I got reviews coming out this week for Venom and all that stuff, so you'll find me there. But yeah, from the Internet California, I'm John Agroni.
And for Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.